God's choice. I'm going to tell you the story of Vashti and Esther. My story can be found in Esther chapter 1 and chapter 2. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Imagine the grand palace of King Xerxes. It was gleaming in the sunlight, its halls echoing with music and laughter. The king had invited nobles and officials from across his vast kingdom to a feast that lasted for days, a celebration of wealth, of power, and glory. Among the guests, the eyes of the kingdom's elite were fixed on one woman, the queen, Queen Vashti. She was beautiful, Vashti was dignified and poised, yet she was a woman of principle. One day in the middle of the feast, King Xerxes called for her to appear before the guests to display her beauty and charm. Vashti looked upon the gathering and said quietly to herself, I will not go. I will not be paraded like an object for their entertainment. My dignity is not for display. My wealth is not defined by their gaze. When the king heard of her refusal, his anger fled, and the court fell silent with tension. Vashti's choice came to a cost. She was removed from her position as a queen, banished from the palace, and a new chapter began to unfold. One she could not yet see, but God was already orchestrating it. The palace was abuzz with speculation. Who would take her place? The king issued a decree across the kingdom, calling for the most beautiful young women to be brought to the palace so he could choose a new queen. Among those brought was a young Jewish woman named Esther. She had been raised by her cousin Mordecai after losing her parents. Esther was beautiful, yes, but she was also humble. Esther was wise and obedient. She knew the value of preparation. She knew the value of patience and trust in God, even in circumstances that seemed uncertain and intimidating. What happened next? Esther entered the palace quietly, following the instruction given to her. For an entire year, a whole year, she received special treatment and guidance, learning the ways of the court, cultivating powers, cultivating wisdom, and trusting God for a good future. What happened next? She could not have known the purpose of God for her, but she faithfully followed the path before her, even when the outcome was unknown. That is a woman of faith. When the day came for Esther to meet the king, she approached her with reverence and courage. King Xerxes looked upon her and was pleased, captivated not only by her beauty, but also by her composure, by her intelligence and character. A virtuous woman who can find Queen Esther. Let's see what happened next. Esther was chosen as the new queen. Oh, I thought you applaud for that. Esther was chosen as the new queen. Come on. God's hand had been working at work, placing her in exactly the place, the right position she deserved. She had been prepared for a moment she could not see, a moment that would later allow her to save her people from destruction. From this story, there are good lessons for us to learn. Number one, God's timing is perfect. Vashti's removal may have seemed like a tragedy, but it created a space for Esther, whose character and faithfulness made her the right person for a moment of destiny. When doors close in our lives, it's not always rejection, often it's redirection. Second, courage comes in many forms. Vashti showed courage by standing for her dignity and refusing to compromise her principles. Esther showed courage by stepping into the place of the palace, following instructions and trusting God in an unfamiliar environment. Life often calls for both kinds of courage, the courage to say no and the courage to step forward when opportunities arise. We can also learn that character matters when circumstance arises. Esther's beauty drew attention, but her humility, wisdom, and obedience won the king's favor and positioned her for influence. God values our hearts and our character above all other thing else. We can also learn that God works behind the scenes. Esther may have felt invisible at that time, but God was orchestrating every detail, every instruction, every treatment, every preparation so that she would be ready for the moment He had planned. We can also learn that obedience and patience open doors. Esther did not rush the process. She followed the guidance given to her, demonstrating faithfulness in preparation. She also demonstrated faithfulness to become the foundation for future courage and leadership. So courage is action. Now we can also learn that Esther's late action would require risking her life to save her people. But that courage was rooted in a season of preparation, trust, and humility. Finally, God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. Esther was an orphan, a young woman from a humble background, yet God placed her in a position where she could impact history and fulfill his plan. As we reflect on this story, we must ask ourselves, are we trusting God when doors close? Are we panicking and forcing our way out by ourselves? Are we leaning on our own understanding? Are we cultivating character? Are we cultivating wisdom? Are we fostering humility while waiting for God's plan to unfold? Do we acknowledge Him in every step we do? Or do we rely on our own understanding? Do we rely solely on our appearances or our human understanding? God's plan is often unseen, but is perfect. When we trust in Him fully, when we lean not on our own understanding, when we acknowledge God in all our ways, He directs our paths. He opens the right doors and prepares us for the purposes He has designed for us. Vashti and Esther remind us that God's timing is never too early and never too late, that courage and integrity are essential, and that faithfulness in small moments prepares us for a great opportunities. God bless you and thanks for listening. I will prepare more stories and come your way. Bye.